Welcome, everyone. It is November 5th, and we are in Scorpio season, if you haven't already noticed. We are gearing up to a new moon on the 13th of November. And I want to start there because I just read something yesterday about Scorpio season that I want to presence as the umbrella of the opportunity that's here for us right now. And it was Vanessa Corazon said this in her astrology daytimer kind of thing that she has. And she said, Scorpio holds the keys to the kingdom. Write that down. Scorpio holds the keys to the kingdom. I think that is brilliant because remember we talked about last time that the beginning of the year in the Celtic pagan tradition starts with Samhain, and Samhain we've celebrated on Halloween, and that is the beginning of the year. So we begin the year with descent. We begin the year with death, and that is so appropriate for what many of us are going through right now. So if we see that death is this portal to rebirth, then we can get alongside of the change that's being asked of us. So if we embrace this period as a cleansing period, as a healing period, as a window of opportunity to let go, then we can emerge stronger and more prepared for what is to come. Because if we take it on, really, life is always preparing us. It's preparing us for whatever is coming next. Only our ego self, our small self, is fighting it. It's in resistance. And so it's exhausting when we fight our own selves, when we fight the current. Have you ever been in the ocean and you've caught a riptide? What's the one thing they tell you to do when you catch a riptide? Like relax and swim away from it. Like don't fight it. People die who fight it. And so as we approach this new moon, and we'll be able to do the transmission for the new moon next week as well. But I felt like it was so important to start preparing our minds as we go in the direction of that new moon. Because that is the time when the light on the external is the lowest. And so we have to amplify the light on the inside. That means our connection to source. That means tuning in to know deeply what is yours to do. And inside of that light, you'll find the creative spark. And that creative spark is what we want to talk about today with Gene Key 1. Gene Key 1, we just came out of Gene Key 44, and it was 5 days, and I didn't get to do the transmission. So if you had a birthday up until today, you were Gene Key 4. Today is Gene Key 5. Gene Key 1, starting with the 5th of November this year. This is the transition point. So if you're born today, you're a 1 line in the profile lines of the I Ching. And that means something to some people and doesn't mean anything to other people. So don't worry about it. But today we are with Gene Key 1. And Gene Key 1 is the shadow of entropy, the gift of freshness, and the city of beauty. So today is a day to remember our creative essence. The essence of creativity comes from Gene Key 1. It's the fire energy. And it pairs with Gene Key 2, the programming partner. And so Gene Key 1 is the masculine and Gene Key 2 is the feminine. And the gene keys 1 and 2 and the bookends of 63 and 64 have within them the pillars of the entire gene key. And so let's presence those pillars as we go into our transmission. Beauty. So the city today is beauty. Gene key 2, it's unity. And 63 is truth, 64 illumination. Or maybe I got that backwards. I'm going to check. Those are the 4 principles underlying the gene keys. Yeah, gene key 63, truth, 64, illumination. So those, let's like all those are the things that are the foundation of all of the gene keys. So I want to read you a story that Richard Rudd included in Gene Key 1's transmission, because I feel like we've been talking about the gene keys and we've never really done, we've never really had the story of the gene keys or the story of the I Ching, which is what the gene keys are based on. There you can see her in the back. Yeah, Jane, you said you're a profile 40. Yeah, you're 44. The profile are the lines, but your life work is gene key 44, because it shifts. The sun is shining on a particular gene key at different times. So you are right in the cusp. And your birthday is today. Okay, happy birthday. Oh, that's awesome. All right, so the dance of Shiva. So just take this transmission in. Once upon a time, perhaps an aeon ago, in a land now become a myth, a young man sat in deep reverie beside a great river. Although this river no longer exists today, legend tells us that its descendants may well be the great Yangtze River, which flows through the heart of the land that we now call China. Our young man gazed upon the sinuous, soft waves as they lapped on the shores by his feet, when all of a sudden a small turtle emerged from the great green mother lode, and drawing itself proudly out of the water, sat beside him to share his gentle contemplation. For some considerable time, neither party spoke, until finally our young man, evidently on the cusp of some great epiphany, exclaimed to the little turtle in a great and wondrous sigh, "Ah, little one, what's it all about then?" Make sure my... Rather, to his surprise, the little turtle revolved in a half circle and nonchalantly turned its back on the young man, while continuing to sun itself lazily and silently. The young man gazed intently at the little creature's back and the intricate interlocking patterns and plates of its shell drying in the luminous sunshine. As he gazed, a strange thing began to occur to him. The more he looked, the more he understood the nature of his question. And so it was that he gave himself up to the moment and gazed with all his heart at that little turtle's back. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, everything began to evanesce and disappear. First the turtle, then the cosmos, and finally the young man himself. It is said that when the young man regained consciousness several hours later, the turtle was gone. Ever since that day, humanity has had a means of understanding every aspect within the universe. It was discovered in the interlacing patterns on a humble turtle's back. And in time, it became arguably the most profound knowledge ever discovered by a human being. It became the I Ching. So the Chinese I Ching is one of the greatest spiritual books of all time, written thousands of years ago by a legendary Chinese emperor. It encapsulates a binary code that charts all the seasons and cycles in life. In the book, these life processes were measured by a simple code of 6 lines, either male or female, and mixed together in a total of 64 combinations. The very first archetype that represented is known as the first hexagram, consisted of a male line in a column. This archetype was seen as the primary code for all creative life in the universe. Its opposite, the second hexagram, consisted of 6 female lines in a column and was seen as the primary code for directing all creative life in the universe. So there you have gene keys 1 and 2, the masculine and the feminine. The creative fire, 1 is the fire, that creative spark, and 2 is water, the flow, the direction of life. So today we turn our attention to the power of that creative spark, the power of our creative spark. And so as we go into the cauldron, and we've been in the cauldron, let's say since the eclipse, and this new moon has some eclipse frequencies to it because there's still this Scorpio energy with Mars. And so and the oppositions are still there. So it's this new moon that we're going into is a time of pure potential, like all new moons, and a cycle change. And yet, like this eclipse, there will be many things that you're shown that have to die. And you most likely are in that kind of death process, having had a full moon with some visibility on what are the patterns, what are the ways of being, what are the people, what are the structures. It's going to come in so many different ways, and it has been coming. That is preparing the new fertile ground for that spark of creativity to emerge. This new moon is going to have some massively polarizing energy to it. It's going to have some fight energy to it. So this is a call to action to come into your center and let any fight go. Just let it go. Don't give your energy to it. This is the time to be the sovereign over your energy, to determine what you choose to give life to. What do you choose to create? That's what this new moon is about. So it's also a multi-dimensional new moon. So those who have ears to hear, those who have eyes to see, will be able to use this portal to quantum leap them to the other side. And I think this is what Vanessa meant when she talked about Scorpio holds the keys to the kingdom. The keys to the kingdom are always in death and rebirth. You know, when my dog died, I made this film called Dog Llama, and some of you have seen it. And I said in that film, if I knew, if my conscious mind knew how much loving and letting go I would have to do, I mean, I don't know if I would have wanted to incarnate, because it's just this cycle of loving something so much. And as Mary Oliver, this is the poem that I track is a Mary Oliver poem in Blackwater Woods. And she says, to be human, you must be able to do these 3 things: to love what is mortal, to hold it against your bones as if your life depends on it, And then when the time comes to let go, to let go. And our human self gets so attached. And our human self loves comfort and loves consistency and safety and security. And it puts those things, safety, security, comfort, in the outer world. And so we get discombobulated when that outer world shifts and changes, which it is inevitable to do. Life is impermanent, says the Buddhists. And so our own locus of safety and security and comfort gets to be that inner light, the inner fire that Gene Key 1 says, this is where we started. This is the Big Bang. And that Big Bang will take you into the next iteration of you. I know I don't often see myself as the spirit being that I am, because I'm so identified with my experience in 3D as a human. And I love being a human. But it's these times, it's these Scorpio times. It says, do you really want to play a ninja game? Because if you do, it's going to require letting go. And my Taurus rising just does not like that kind of stuff. It's fixed. It likes things the way it is. It doesn't like change. And in some ways, that's how all of us are. Because change to our animal brain, to our reptile brain, is a threat. So we have worked hard to eliminate all threats in our world. But the spiritual growth path has us taking leaps. It has us taking quantum leaps. It has us becoming someone we haven't been before. So in this creative spark, what it tells us is that there is no problem. There's no thing that you can't do, because all it takes is creativity. One of the most incredible gifts that we're given as spirit in a body is this capacity to be creative. I mean, perhaps the four-leggeds have it, perhaps the winged ones have it in their way, but we have it in the way of ideas and the manifestation of something into nothing. We are constantly recreating the creation process. And so fall in love with your creativity. Fall in love with your spark. Fall in love with that part of you that can invent yourself out of any problem. You know, if you need money, creativity is your answer. If you need romance, creativity is your answer. If you need fun, creativity is your answer. Whatever you need, creativity is your answer, believing that you're the one that can bring it. Because the mind will say, I can't, I don't know how, I can't. Like, think of for yourself, and put in the chat, what are the things the mind says that stop you from utilizing your creativity? It's always something. And so when we know that what we have is a result of who we're being, our touchstone is creativity. We can always be creative. So when you take on the mantle, I am creative, there is no situation that I can't create myself out of. Then you start to see and have the self-concept of someone who. So when you run a business or you teach children or you sell products or you guide people in transformation, centering prayer, whatever it is, your creativity is the way through. Someone's in resistance, you're in resistance, creativity is the way through. And that is the spark. The shadow is entropy. And this entropy is this feeling that there's a shadow band frequency that covers my light. It's dense. Now there's a trick to this gene key 1 that we must presence. And that is that creativity goes on a wave. Have you noticed that before? There's just times when you're not creative. And so gene key 1 says that's actually part of the process. The stillness, the percolation. And we interpret it as depression. We interpret it as something bad, something wrong. And gene key 1 says, hold a different idea of it. Let yourself hold space for you to emerge, because all creativity needs the fertile void. And that's what this new moon will bring up. Yeah, Katie says, I'm not depressed, it's deep rest. Yes, she's our wordsmith. Yeah, reframing depression. Wouldn't that be incredible for kids growing up in school? That they're on the low point of the wave because something wants to get birthed in them. And if the teacher can hold the space, like, hey, go out and be in nature during this time. Go take your shoes off and stand on the dirt. You know, what would we tell a child? That's what we get to tell us. And so the gift is freshness. And this freshness isn't just newness, as Richard Rudd says. This freshness has this quality of aliveness to it. And I really love that, because it is also, like in Elizabeth Gilbert's Big Magic. It's a beautiful book around creativity. And that big magic has a life of its own. It has its own essence. And so you're partnering in a way with that idea to bring it into fruition, to use your embodiment to be the conduit of that thing having shape and form. And so freshness is a contribution of aliveness to the planet. And then we come to the city. And the city is perhaps the reason for life. Life is because of beauty, beauty is because of life. That's the teaching of the gene key around beauty. Beauty with a capital B. Not a standard that we've created, because beauty with a capital B has no standard. Standards are made up by people to compare themselves to, so that they can say if they're inferior or superior. That is a construct. It's completely made up. And we have shit tons of standards, right? I took a whole class for 10 weeks on standards. And we can really understand that we got those standards from our culture, from our families, from the 5 people we hang out with, from the Instagram feeds, because every time you like something, every time you touch something, the algorithm feeds you more of it. So you're getting a self-perpetuated, self-fulfilling reality on social media. Like there's a whole vast world and you're getting yourself reflected back to you over and over and over again. That's entropy. And so to bring beauty with a capital B, there are no standards. It's an experience. It's awe. It brings you to your knees. And you can't describe it. You can't tell someone else about it because the minute you start to do it, doesn't it sound like a concept? And it kind of lost all its thing. You know, if you've ever seen something amazing and you try to describe it to someone and they just look at you because they're not having the experience of it. So beauty is experiential. And it can be so random. It can catch you just on a moment's notice of watching an old person cross the street, and something about it just hits you and you break out into tears. It can be a story of some incredible act of humanity that disproves your thoughts about humanity or yourself. And so part of our prayer in this Scorpio season, as we go deep to like unearth and get rid of the stuff that's in the way, your patterns, your view of yourself, who you think you are. Let your aim be beauty. Let your aim be the conduit of that kind of experience for yourself and others. So, when those little bracelets, like what would Jesus do? And like, what would beauty do? What would beauty do? That's the question to ask yourself in these moments. What would beauty do? What is beauty asking me to shed? What would beauty have me no longer need? And I'll end with just the reminder, and I've said it a few times, but the reminder that in this time of letting go in this Scorpio season, we're going to get into some really fast energy as we move into Sagittarius and the full moon in Gemini. And the world will have an occurrence of speed, even going into next year, even more amping up of speed. So things are going to change. We are going to be in a gear shift. So let us use this time as not so much what we have to clean on the exterior, but let's focus on the interior. Who are we being? Because our self-concept is what's creating our entire world. If you see yourself as someone who isn't worthy to have something, then you won't have that thing. So it requires not doing more healing work necessarily. It could just be a simple shift of a choice to see yourself in a new way. So what's the thing that all this letting go and all this change has been wanting to birth in you? This way of being. And that is your spark of light. That's the game that we got to play here. It's so fun when we play it from that place instead of have to and drudgery and overcoming inner resistance and the fight. And there'll be plenty of that we'll witness on the outside. But we get to be the creative spark. So let's create some spark here by rubbing our hands together as this transmission comes to a completion. So grateful for that turtle. So grateful for the universe giving us all these signs of and wonders on the back of a turtle, in the leaf of a tree. Yeah, and let's beam that out as the light within us shines forth to direct our path through the darkness. May all beings benefit from the merits of our efforts. Namaste.